Now that we've looked at why government intervene in a market and where market fails, let's talk about situations of government intervention. The first very important discussion we like to do is called the maximum price. Maximum price is a price which the government puts in a market below equilibrium. And this maximum price is also called sometimes price ceiling, and it could do this for any good and service that it feels is overpriced and may not be affordable for lower income groups. So, for example, in a housing market, you may see rents to be really high, and the government may decide to put a maximum price in order to make sure that anyone who cannot afford it is able to afford it. So, goods which are necessities like housing, for example, like bread, or like for example vaccines these days, in order to make them affordable, a maximum price could be a good way to make sure it's affordable for low income consumers. Let's look at the diagram for maximum price. So when we draw a diagram for maximum price, and let's say this is a housing market where we're looking at demand and supply of houses in a city. We have a downward sloping demand curve and upward sloping supply curve. And let's say right now the equilibrium price is P naught, which the government believes to be too high. At P naught price or rent, the quantity that is being sold or that is being rented out, or the apartments that are being rented out, is Q naught at the price of P naught. If the government believes this price is too high, the government could have put a maximum price below equilibrium. Now, a maximum price, in order to be effective, it has to be put below equilibrium, because if you put a maximum price above equilibrium, it won't be effective. This is the maximum a producer can charge. So when they put P max price, one thing that will happen is suddenly when the price goes down, quantity demanded will go up, because a lot of people will be encouraged to, for example, rent houses in this city. So quantity demanded may go to Q2, but quantity supplied, on the other hand, because the rent has gone down to P max, a lot more landlords will be discouraged to now provide their houses for rent, and as a result, there will be quantity supplied going to become Q2. And because of this, you can figure out from the diagram that quantity demanded is more than quantity supplied, as quantity demanded is at Q1 and quantity supplied is at Q2, leading to a shortage in the market equal to Q1 minus Q2. We can also argue that the price here is not performing its rationing function anymore. Individuals may be willing and able to pay the price, but it's not certain that they will end up getting the good, because suddenly there is a shortage. Who will get the good? We'll talk about that in a little while, but not everyone who's willing to get the good. In fact, some people who were previously living in the houses are now without a house because there is again a shortage happening. So Q naught minus Q2 people who were previously getting the good are now denied of the good. But the important thing to understand is this, that there will also be an impact on consumer surplus and producer surplus. Let's try to do this. Let's try to extend this line a little further up. And let's call this area 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And let's look at before and after consumer and producer surplus. So if I look at before, when the price was P naught, the quantity was Q naught, consumer surplus was area under the demand curve, as we talked about earlier in the discussions. Consumer surplus is area under the demand curve above the market price P naught. So consumer surplus will be area 1 plus 2 plus 3, right? All this triangle that is formed here. On the other hand, producer surplus is going to be 4 plus 5 plus 6. So we have a producer surplus which is area under the market price above the supply curve. Now this is before the maximum price. But what happens after the maximum price? Let's look at that. After the maximum price, Now you can see Pmax is the price, but Q2 is the quantity, which means consumer surplus will be equal to 1 plus 2 plus 5. Why is that so? Because now, look at this, guys. This is the demand curve I'm looking at, because these are the consumers who are only getting the goods. If I could just make this yellow, this is the part of the demand curve that is actually getting it, and this is the price. So area under the demand curve above the P max price is area 1 plus 2 plus 5. And producer surplus, guys, is going to be area 6 only. This is the area that is happening because now with P max price, only Q2 apartments are being rented out. Which would mean, guys, you can understand this, that Q naught minus Q2 consumers who were previously getting the good, their consumer surplus is going to be 0. So the lucky consumers, the lucky Q2 consumers will get the good at a higher consumer surplus, because if you look at it, previously they were only getting 1 and 2 because area 3 was going to Q0 minus Q2 consumers. But now some consumers are lucky because they are getting this bit of extra consumer surplus, which was previously with producer. But some consumers are denied of the good, which who are getting the good, which were Q0 minus Q2. So we can argue this, that in general, some consumers are worse off, while other consumers will be better off, those who are lucky to get the good. Also, the landlords or the producers after maximum price are worse off for sure, because their producer surplus, which was previously 4 plus 5 plus 6, is now only area 6. The government may react to shortages in a number of ways, and their job is to also eliminate these shortages. So first thing the government does in order to eliminate shortage could be they can give the good in some kind of rationing mechanism on the basis of, let's say, first come first serve. But if they do so, if they use first come first serve basis, it would be a matter of luck rather than money whether one is able to get the good. So while this could solve the problem in terms of deciding who will get the good, but it may not be money that will decide it, but simply luck. They can also give goods in terms of devising a strategy where they could give the good on the basis of the greatest need, or issuing a very restricted quantity of the good per person of per family. Like for example, if I have a family of 3 people, I may give a particular quantity, but if I have a family of 5 people, I may give more. But I could actually ration according to the size of the family or the number of people in a household, and so on. They can also minimize the shortage and the related problems uh, by actually undertaking production. So I want to show you this in terms of a diagram. Let's say government decides to undertake production themselves. Uh, what will happen, or increase supply? What will happen? Let's see that in terms of diagram. So let's say this is a demand and supply, and let's say we put a maximum price below equilibrium like P max, right? Now, this would mean there will be a shortage, as we talked about, of let's say Q2 minus Q1. Let me label this as demand supply, my quantity, and my price on my y-axis. Now, if the government wants to get rid of this shortage, as we talked about, and what if they do that by actually increasing supply? If they increase supply, this will result in, when the supply curve shifts to the right, this will result in actually that shortage to eliminate and the price to go down. Now, what are the ways we can do that? Number one, if it has stocks, it can draw on stocks. Number two, it could assume direct production of a good, or even sometimes grant subsidy or tax relief to producers to increase supply. Lastly, government can also do this, is that they can reduce the demand for the good. For example, if it is housing in New York City, and let's say the government doesn't really have options to increase the supply, they can reduce the demand of, for example, housing in New York City by providing better substitutes and cheaper substitutes in other cities. For example, better housing in Bronx or Brooklyn or even New Jersey, which are all close by, and improve the transportation. In a way, when you reduce the demand of the good, the shortage will disappear. Now, if the government doesn't really solve the problem of a shortage, what will happen? Well, we argue this, and I want to go back to our diagram. We argue this that there could be a possibility of a black market. Now, look at this, guys. When you look at Q2, for Q2, what's the maximum people are willing to pay? And the answer is people are willing to pay this point. Let's call this point A. This is the point what we call where people are willing to pay as much as point A, or let's call this PB, B for black. So PB is the price they're willing to pay. Now, what I'm trying to point out is that if the government doesn't solve the problem of maximum price, then basically what will happen is that some people, some landlords or even tenants may illegally extract under the table payments from consumers by uh, giving them the apartments illegally at a price PB. On paper, they might be showing P max, but in reality, PB will be extracted because there are people, Q2 people, who are actually willing to pay as much as PB. And if that happens, then the black market philosophy of making goods affordable for people will actually fail. So, in order for government to really solve the problem of making goods affordable, they may need to eliminate the shortage. And economic theory predicts that maximum price can benefit some consumers who are lucky to get the good, but it will be a disappointment for a lot many people who are denied of the good. And it is definitely not going to work out for producers. Also, a maximum price that we put above equilibrium may not be effective simply because the maximum that you can charge if it's above equilibrium means that the equilibrium price will be the one that will determine the market forces of demand, supply, and allocation of resources.